Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Dataiku, Snowflake, Materialize, and Nextla. I'm Stephen Fagg, Director at Database Trends and Applications and Unisphere Research. I will be your host for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled The Future of Analytics, Cloud Data Warehouses, Data Lakehouses, and more. Before we begin, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. We're going to try to get to as many questions as possible later. Now, to introduce our speakers for today, we're very excited to have with us Patrick Frame, Sales Engineer Partnerships at Dataiku, Scott Teal, Product Marketing at Snowflake, Nate Stewart, Chief Executive Officer at Materialize, and Ravi Krishnan, Head of Sales Engineering at Nextla. So each speaker today is going to give a brief presentation, and then we're going to dive into a group discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the event over to our first speaker today to get us started. Welcome to the broadcast, Patrick.
Thanks very much. And thanks everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to listen to us talk about the future of analytics together. So I have just a few slides for you all about how Dataiku thinks about optionality. For those of you who don't know Dataiku, we are the universal AI platform that hundreds of Fortune 2000 companies use to build analytics and AI projects on top of whatever software stack they have for data storage and compute. Cool. So let me just do this. Okay, so quick kind of things to think about. Do you agree or disagree with these statements? First off, the majority of those who will derive value with data in AI will not be software and code experts, but business experts. This might be a hot take, and feel free to post in the chat if you agree or disagree. You can also say like a combination. Okay. Well, I would say that with bringing business experts into the loop, as soon as you want to expand AI and data science to those without coding skills, this means that human skill optionality is key at your enterprise. You need people of different skills to be able to work with your data. The second question I want to pose to you is, there's no magical data lake. Data will always be scattered, even more of the case with unstructured data. This is something that we think is the case in enterprise data science right now. And this means that you need data optionality. You need to connect to different data sources. Third, every year in the next 10 years, a new major technology will arise and become part of the most enterprise AI stack. There are so many different companies out there fighting to compete in the space, and they are constantly innovating and doing new things. We believe that this means that you need tech optionality. You need some sort of platform that works with all sorts of new technologies, including technologies of the future. And lastly, strong governance requires a strong end-to-end operational view on the full process from the data to AI. So while you have optionality of human skill, data, technology integrations, we do believe that enterprises are looking for an end-to-end view on everything going on in their enterprise. They don't want to need to go through all these different places to move workflows into production. So we believe that end-to-end operational transparency in one place is something that companies want. So just what Dataiku is trying to do, how we think about this stuff is we try to empower all employees to be able to use data and AI. We try to connect to data no matter where it is, unstructured, structured, semi-structured. Integrate with all popular technologies such as GCP, AWS, Azure services, Databricks, Snowflake, OpenAI, the other AI vendors out there. And lastly, what Dataiku tries to do is govern the full life cycle. So there'd be this one platform that can do data ingestion, ETL, data cleaning, traditional machine learning, Gen AI agent building stuff, production, dashboarding, etc. So that's how we think about it. Connecting to all these different data sources, leveraging a company's compute infrastructure and Gen AI services, providing an interface with full code and low code capabilities for anyone in an organization to clean data, train models, build Gen AI powered applications, and also deploy them into production really quickly. So yeah, I kind of like when we thought about the topic of analytics, cloud data warehouses, and data lakehouses, I think optionality is key in the space. People are looking to separate all these different layers from each other. And so that's just how Dataiku as a company is thinking about the space. We try to connect to everything, use all compute sources, be very flexible for new technology coming onto the scene, including especially the Gen AI technology out there. And then also I think the sleeper is skill optionality. So to empower like non-programmers to be able to use all these tech. All right, cool. That's it. I'll kick it over to Scott from Snowflake.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here to talk about all things in the future of analytics. Let's see. Let's go to. There we go. All right. So if you've heard of Snowflake, you've probably heard of it as described as like the data warehouse built for the cloud. To this day, Snowflake is still quite popular in the data warehousing market. But over the past several years, the Snowflake platform has expanded to do a lot more. It's a platform that helps organizations in lots of industries address their silos and complexity challenges. And we're all about making data and AI easy, efficient, and trustworthy. So you also may have heard the term of a data cloud. You can think of that as like a global network of data, applications, services that help with address some of these complexity and silo problems. What the things that we hear time and time again of what makes Snowflake appealing and unique is that there's not a bunch of pieces or tools you have to assemble. It's a unified and a fully managed platform that's not just for your SQL developers, your DBAs and analysts, but also for data scientists and even software engineers and business users, anyone who touches data in some way. And another thing that we hear is by being a fully managed platform, it gives great ease of use, simplicity, it's very scalable, and it's fully governed end to end. If we peel back the covers of more of what this actually looks like, I know there's a lot of features going on here, but the point is that there's a ton that you can get in one platform. Multiple data types, structured and unstructured, open source formats, fully managed formats, multiple programming languages, CPUs, GPUs, use cases like stream processing, batch processing, analytics, ML, AI. And there's lots of tools and interfaces. So whether you're a developer that likes to work with code and APIs, or a CLI, or a business user who wants to interact with a chatbot, there are solutions for you. And rather than just saying that there's a bunch of features, the point of this is that there's with Snowflake, you can kind of build what you need. And that could be like the more classic data warehouse where you put all your data in one place. You primarily use SQL to interact with that data, but also a data lake if you are working with unstructured or semi-structured types, or a lakehouse if you're working with open table formats like Apache Iceberg, or a data mesh if you're working in a more distributed domain-oriented manner. We have customers that are using Snowflake in all of these ways, and I encourage you, if this sounds interesting, to check out our website to see what our customers are doing. With that, I will pass it over to Nate to tell us more about Materialize.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nate Stewart, CEO of Materialize. And what I want to talk about today is some of the different ways you can act confidently on fast-changing data. This is becoming a really big topic, especially with AI transformation happening all around us, where you have these super valuable models, but you realize the value of that model doesn't come into play until it's time to do that inference step. And the value of the inference really comes with that live operational context that is in each and every one of your organizations. So one of the biggest challenges in pulling this off is recognizing that, yes, there are data silos, but how do you transform, deliver, and act on this fast changing data while it's still fresh, right? So how do you do that in a way that is you can do it with a very high level of trust? And when I talk a little bit about why that's so difficult, the first thing you could do is go to where your fresh data lives, right? That's your operational systems, your Postgres, your MySQL, your Oracle. You could run your queries there, but these systems are not designed for doing fast transforms. The latency for those queries will take a very long time. You can move to a data warehouse, which are specifically designed for doing very complex queries, but the time it takes to go from those operational systems through a batch ETL process means by the time you get that answer, it's no longer fresh. Think about the inference step required to do a chatbot, for example. If the chatbot couldn't understand the up-to-date customer context, that interaction wouldn't be a great reflection of your brand. And then lastly, you could use a stream processor, but that introduces a lot of complexity, and you may or may not have the talent to actually pull this off, not just to get it into production, but to maintain it and iterate on it over time. And so what we're doing at Materialize is we've created a real-time data integration platform. It uses SQL to let you transform, deliver, and act on fast-changing data. So you can do this with the team that you have today. Some specific examples include working with manufacturing and logistics, doing things like dynamic digital twins. How do you create a single source of truth, a single pane of glass for everything happening in a supply chain, creating those operational dashboards so you can take corrective actions as soon as something looks out of whack? Or in financial services, doing live roll-ups of portfolio evaluations and doing things like that. So very fast aggregations, again, on that fast moving data, or interacting with customers while they're still on your site. So activity-based notifications. The secret sauce for Materialize is that rather than doing all of the complex queries on read, we're doing a small amount of work as writes come in. So we've leveraged some breakthroughs that came out of Microsoft research that were invented by our co-founder to move from a reactive approach to data transformation to a proactive one. That's where you get this incredible level of efficiency, incredible levels of cost savings versus traditional approaches. Materialize integrates with your existing stack. So we look like a read replica. You can stream updates from your Postgres, your MySQL, your SQL servers. You can push updates to your downstream systems to enable event-driven architectures based off of that transformed data. And you can even connect your BI tools to Materialize if you want a up-to-date view of what's happening in your organization. So again, Materialize is the easiest way to assemble and modify trustworthy and live data products. You can do it in minutes rather than months, and you can do it with the team you already have. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our website at materialize.com. With that, I will pass it to Ravi.
Thank you. So just to quickly introduce, nice to meet everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Ravi Krishnan. I head the sales engineering here at Nextla. Been in the data and integration space for a little over 23 years, helping customers with their data and automation journey. So a little bit about Nextla, right? We are an enterprise data and an AI integration platform powered by metadata intelligence. I'll talk about what this shiny metadata intelligence is about, right? Our core mission is about getting the ready-to-use data in the hands of every user within the organization, irrespective of the skill level, right? Whether they are core data engineers, they're non-technical users, or business users, and meeting them where they are, where the data could either be used for operational integration, analytics, or analytical purposes, or even for Gen AI. Here are some of the few customers, big enterprise customers who have been using Nextla in a variety of different ways, right? So when you look into DoorDash, every single product that you see in your DoorDash app is powered by Nextla. So what's happening behind the scenes is Nextla gives that unified layer to bring in all those inventory, catalog information, stocks, etc., all together, because the information from a Home Depot is going to be completely different from an information that's going to come in from Walgreens and so on. So, and we are doing this at a scale. Today, we are processing around 5 trillion data points using this process. Looking into the analytical space, like American Express is one of the big customers who are using Nextla to be able to integrate data across their distributed application sources and move them into a data warehouse like Snowflake for analytics. From a GenAI perspective, Johnson & Johnson, J&J, is using Nextla anytime they launch a new drug, and Nextla is being used behind the scenes to help convert and provide the data to FDA. But behind the scenes, Nextla is connecting to all those digital health indicators, right, from those devices from customer's body and making it available to FDA format. So before I talk about how Nextla really does this, let's take a step back and really understand our current state of data architecture in place. We all know this, right? It's not something new. Today, we have data scattered across multiple different systems, be it your operational systems across SaaS, on-premise, or homegrown applications. We need to move this data to analytical systems where analysis and stuffs are being done on. Then we have the third-party data that we need to pull in to enrich them, right? The insights from those analytical systems need to be sent to downstream applications like manufacturing or marketing. GenAI has now increased those integration needs multifold. So what has ended up happening here is we have a spaghetti of these integrations and connectivity across all of these different systems. And again, this has been there, but what has made it even worse these days is there has been a huge fragmentation of integration tools that enterprises are using, right? So whether that's for an ELT purpose, for an iPaaS use cases where you have the bunch of technologies, right? CDC, custom code. This has resulted into a huge fragmentation of integration tools. So let's say if I have to onboard a new use case, or let's say even a new person joins into my organization, the time it's going to take for them to understand and wrap all of those things before they can be productive, it's huge, right? And that's impacting your whole self-service and the democratization needs. This is where Nextla comes in. What we are trying to do is basically unify all these integration styles and making the data available to the user when, where, and how they need it. So let me talk about how Nextla really does this. At the core, we allow you to connect to all of these different applications, data source, irrespective of their deployments topology. And what we build is called as a virtual data products. In other words, in Nextla's word, we call as Nextset. This is powered by metadata intelligence. So I talked about briefly what a metadata intelligence is. We are powered by that. But essentially, the moment you use Nextla to connect to any of your data sources, we provide you with the detailed metadata intelligence about the schemas of what the structure of the document looks like, what are some of the sample data, the data characteristics. Today, when you have data coming in from like ERPs or SAP, many of these data are not even understandable of what it is. We give you the ability to parse it, again, with a GenAI looking into the sample data to be able to come up with answers like what this data could potentially be, right? Giving you the ability to validate those and finally document this entire data product. So at the end of the day, you're not worrying about applications that you need to integrate to, but rather focus on data that means business. So now that we have identified or helped derive the metadata intelligence for the virtual data products that are automatically generated by the Nextla platform, these auto-generated data products can further be enriched to transformed, filtering, joining, etc., to create what we call as transformed data products. This could be a combination of one or data coming in from multiple other data products and meeting the user where they are. So as a business analyst who is in the world of Tableau or Power BI, we have a direct connectivity. So right from Tableau, you can connect to the data products and the data scientist analyst can consume it. Whereas if it's a data scientist, they are in the world of Amazon SageMaker or Google Cloud Studio or Juniper Notebooks, we have a clients for that. Coming to the GenAI side of it, these data products can directly be consumed by GenAI in place, whether it's for structured or unstructured data. Developers, on a click of a button from these data products, can expose or digitize the data as an API, making it available for consumptions, and so on. And the way we do that is by providing you with a multi-cloud and a multi-speed data processing. So you as an end user or as an engineer doesn't have to worry about how to run this. You build those connectivity and integration, and Nextla on the fly determines the right processing engine to be able to support whether it's your real-time integration, your batch integration, streaming integrations. It's all provided to you as part of the platform. And finally, so now that we have met the data where the user needs it, governance and control is more important, right? And this is where Nextla provides with an enterprise data marketplace where the publishers of the data can securely publish the assets and the consumers are governed and controlled in terms of how they want to access those. To summarize, what Nextler provides is that one unified platform that unifies all different styles of integration, enabling enterprises to achieve a converged integration, supporting a need for democratized innovation with security and control, and finally accelerating your AI projects into production. So with that, Stephen, I'll hand it over back to you.
Thank you very much, Ravi, and thank you everyone for those fantastic presentations. Okay, so we're going to dive into our group discussion questions. Patrick, I'm going to let you lead off. What do you view as the top challenge right now for organizations to become more data-driven?
I think that we see developers building things that business doesn't want. So I think that's the challenge, and I think the ways that we've seen companies successfully solve it is either through increasing the data literacy and tools for the business to build stuff themselves, or just increasing collaboration between developers and business stakeholders.
Got it. Scott, do you agree, or do you have a different challenge in mind?
I think what comes to mind is in years past, like standing up data infrastructure has been a slog, especially when you're trying to design your infrastructure to account for like company growth. So it needs to scale. If you don't have a way to like see all the data that's available across your business, and that way is like scalable, is like more people and more work is happening on that data, I think the challenge is that you'll hit a wall where people aren't using the right data, right? Like the things they do have access to might not be the right set of data, or it's incomplete. And then if they are using the right data, but then they're not getting the answers that they need quick enough, right? Could be because of like latency trade-offs or performance trade-offs. So I think those two combined are like the main challenges that I'm seeing.
Understood. Nate, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the previous two responses. There's a lot of, fundamental data assets spread throughout your organization, but how do you actually get the value of those assets if they're siloed? And how do you, yes, do the discoverability, but make sure you can stitch those into together into a way that is consistent and trustworthy, right? We talk a lot about RAG architectures and Gen AI pipelines, but if you have a data pipeline that's inconsistent, that data pipeline's hallucinating, right? So how do you trust it? And so that's one of the big things that's top of mind when it comes to unlocking this capability.
That's a great point. Ravi, would love your input on this question as well.
Sure. I completely agree with the other team members here, right? For me, it's about three things. Again, some of what we have already covered here, right, is the data silos and fragmentation, right? The data is scattered across, like I was saying, across multitude of these different systems. The ability to bring together all these data in a unified way is the number one. Second, I would say is the data quality and consistency, right? Because today the data is fragmented. Earlier, when you looked into data being in a monolithic system, it was considered as an asset, right? I didn't have to worry about much of it. But now that it's being fragmented across all of these different distributed applications, it has a potential to be updated and touched at any given point of time, right? So thereby I call today the data as a liability, and thereby making it inconsistent very quick as soon as something changes, right? So it's essential to bring all this data in a unified way so that we are not working on the copies of the data, but rather working on the real-time aspects of it. The third and the most important one that I see is the challenges in fostering a data-driven culture, right? We can talk about all the great strategies, but until the right culture is put in place, I don't think enterprises are going to be successful, right? It's a joke. I say that a culture eats strategy for breakfast 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we got to bring in the culture and strategy together to help make sure the enterprises solve these problems.
That's a great point, Ravi, and I'm glad you brought up culture. That certainly makes a big difference. Okay, Ravi, I'm going to let you hit off first on this next question since you went last on our first one. Ravi, for organizations out there that are striving to build more integrated, scalable, and real-time data ecosystems, what is one thing you would recommend they focus on to succeed?
That's a great question, Stephen. I would focus on building a unified data architecture solutions, right? That can seamlessly integrate data that's spread and scattered across all of these different systems. This means adopting more of a data fabric or a data product approach, right? Which allows every user within the enterprise to easily share the data, access the data, and leverage the data, right? Way how they want it in place. So it's around creating and building a unified data architecture would be my answer.
Understood. Nate, you mentioned fast changing data during your presentation. Would love to get your input on this.
Yeah, when you're thinking about solving these problems, I think it's important to take a step back and look at the tools that are available to your organization, both the tools that you have today and also some of the new innovations that are expanding your toolkit, right? So you look to your stream processor for solving one problem. You look to your database for another, a cache for another. But there are new tools that are emerging. And one of the most important ones is this idea of incremental computation, incremental view maintenance. How do you not redo all of the work every time you have a question, but keeping that work up to date? So this is a new primitive that we're seeing increasingly roll out for organizations that are trying to build more real-time and data-intensive applications.
Understood. That makes sense. Scott, what about you? Do you agree with our prior answers? Are you thinking of something else here?
So the question was, what would I recommend for organizations who are trying to be more integrated, scalable, and build more real-time data ecosystems? What comes to mind is letting the business case help be the guide for finding the balance between trade-offs like latency and cost. So things there's usually a trade-off involved. So when you're seeking to make data available faster, it's probably natural to think, well, what's the fastest that this thing can go? Similar, like if you're buying a car, well, what's the fastest or best car that I can get for my budget? But also wonder, how much value am I getting from a few extra seconds or a few extra milliseconds shaved off the latency? Is it worth that additional cost? So maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but for organizations who are trying to go more integrated in real time, evaluating that trade-off is important versus just generally picking always the lowest latency may not be the most cost effective.
Understood. Do you really need that Ferrari, or could you settle for a little less? And where's that balance, ultimately to get the most from an ROI standpoint? Patrick, I haven't forgot about you. What are your thoughts here?
I think in terms of the ecosystem choices, we see some customers trying to hyper optimize and test out everything out there and spend a lot of time and money on migrations, trying to move to the next incremental tool out there. So I'd recommend that companies do a lot of research into what they want their ecosystem foundation to be and get confirmation from those companies that are doing it, that you can trust them 10 years down the line, because I think it can waste a ton of money changing things every 2 years, especially for things like data warehouses, data lakes, where it's just super painful to migrate. And so I think that's where Snowflake, doesn't pay me or anything, but that's why you should invest in a tool like Snowflake. But I think to Ravi's point, I really like the idea of, well, you probably want to invest in a vendor like Snowflake for data warehousing and data storage because they've just mastered it. You probably want to bring the data productization in-house, where you develop your own policies for creating these production data products to the business. Whereas leave the stuff like compute and storage to the experts, bring in a vendor to do that.
Understood. Okay, Nate, I'm going to let you lead off on this next question. And I had to ask a question related to AI. What role will AI and Gen AI play in the future of data analytics?
Yeah, it's going to put a lot of pressure on a theme that's been present throughout this whole conversation, which is data integration. Materialize, the customers we work with, the engineers, the architects, they're always thinking about end-to-end latency. How can we do more in that hot path of a customer interaction, of some alert or fraud detection use case? And when you think about the sources for latency in a analytics pipeline, there's a lot of conversation right now around how efficiently can you turn a prompt into an answer, right? Like, what is that response latency for some of these larger models? But the other important thing is, how long does it take to construct that prompt in the first place, right? So how long does it take me to get the structured data from my knowledge base? How long does it take me to get that inventory history from my customer? How long does it take me to get their preferences, join that together in a prompt, and then go to the model? And so depending on how long it takes to go from customer interaction to inference, that's going to determine whether or not you can provide this AI experience in the hot path, or if this is going to be something that happens offline, which may or may not be as valuable. So real-time data integration will be increasingly important for those online use cases.
I would certainly agree. Ravi, I'm going to let you go next. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, just piggybacking to what a friend at Materialize just said, absolutely agree with the real-time integrations, right? For me, when I look into the future of data and analytics, I think it's going to be around predictive and prescriptive AI, right? So AI is going to certainly help up with advanced predictive analytics, right? Where these AI models are now going to enable or empower organizations to forecast outcomes even better than what they've been doing it. Gen AI is going to take this to a completely next level, right? So while the traditional AI or model AI has helped you with identifying the forecast, generative AI is now going to help us take it further by saying, how can I actually help you put this in an action, right? With a clear course of actions putting in place. But at the end of the day, for the predictive and the prescriptive analytics to work, it's all about the data and the real-time data in place, right? So it's not just about copies, because I've seen traditionally where enterprises have worked is like, hey, let's make a copy of this, let's move the data and then work off it. But like I said, the data is scattered and it's a liability being touched over all over the places. You cannot just work on a copy of data for the AI to be effective. You got to have real-time things of it. And that's where I see investing on a unified data architecture or a platform that can allow not just real-time integration, but also allowing any user within the organizations to be able to fetch, leverage, and access, and then empower these AIs to do their work, is where I see things going on.
Understood. I appreciate it, Ravi. I agree. Patrick, really curious for your take on this. What do you see as the issues, and do you see AI starting to eat a little bit of, eat away at kind of traditional, maybe analytics use cases?
No. I think there's such a place in the business for summary statistics and bar charts and time series charts. CEOs make decisions, and even line leaders. I think Gen AI is super good at unstructured text data and doing stuff like summarization or classification of unstructured text, or building something like a chatbot, which is great. That's just a totally different thing from analytics, though. So I don't think it's like one cannibalizing the other. And I think it's like a lot of business leaders are confused and they say like, oh, the AI can just predict the future or whatever. And I think that's just not the case. And I think, maybe it'll get there 10 years from now, but I think there's such a place for traditional analytics. There's such a place for traditional machine learning, for stuff like fraudulent transaction prediction, using traditional techniques like random forest models and XGBoost model, which is like 15 years old now. So I think it's more of a different use case rather than like replacing.
That's a great point. I would tend to agree with you on that, Patrick. And, sometimes nowadays you do hear business people talking about AI and what they're really just kind of describing as analytics, something that's not necessarily new. So I think there's some confusion as well. Scott, you're hitting cleanup on this. What are your thoughts?
I'm very curious how this is all going to pan out. I think we're already starting to see some of the early innings of this from the Snowflake standpoint. Like, for example, like we're already seeing healthcare companies that are automating the note-taking process, financial services companies that are measuring customer satisfaction with the help of AI. Generally, my personal opinion is that AI as it pertains to the data analytics space, it's going to improve the human experience. So helping people work faster, explore and iterate on ideas that they otherwise may not have realized. I think, sorry about that. I think we've all seen a demo of, sorry. I'll leave it as,
no worries.
I think it's going to more help the human experience than replace it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Scott. And no worries. I've got a dog as well. And everyone's excited about AI these days. So you know what? If you're good, I'm going to let you lead off on our next question. And that question is, how can organizations foster data democratization to empower users to access and analyze data more independently?
I think it starts, well, who knows when the noise is going to cut out, but I think it starts with providing access to high quality and clean data, right? So like making sure that data can be trusted in all different parts of the business. But I think equally important is helping when that data is available and it's trusted, is by giving people with different skill sets and preferences like the right tools. So that could be a dashboard, that could be a chatbot, that could be for developers like APIs to help build products and applications. I think across your data, and that can be like both first party that you're collecting or generating yourself, and also third party that might be distributed to you. So data, apps, models, you need in order for data democratization to be real, I think there has to be guardrails in place, and the ability to put guardrails in place to help make sure that all the things are used responsibly, especially when there's many users using multiple different interfaces to interact with these different objects.
That's a great point, Scott. And yeah, I can see, there's the access angle here, and that can get messy, obviously, without governance and other kind of guardrails in place. Nate, I'm going to let you take this one next.
Yeah, my background is in product management. So one of the approaches to solve this that resonates a lot with me is the data product. Looking at the data as an API, what are the needs of the consumers? How do you figure out how to shape that data in a way that makes it most accessible? How do you keep track of the use of that product and refine it over time so that the entire organization gets the most of that data? That's one of the core unlocks to data democratization. In the case of Materialize, we think about it as, earlier the Snowflake team talked about the data fabric or the data mesh. There's a version of a data mesh that you can create where the entire mesh is up to date and consistent. And for that to happen, the trade-off is you can't do this with petabytes of data, but you can create these smaller meshes where it looks like the entire system has one giant database. It just so happens that those views are governed. They're always up to date. They're always consistent. So it's very powerful for doing things like coordinating microservices. So in this case, the data products may not be for human consumers. It is a very powerful way to democratize the types of data that shows up within microservice domains. So that's something I'm very excited about.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I do think that data products and kind of data as a product thinking, are definitely a step in the right direction. And, we continue to see interesting developments in the data mesh as well as the data fabric space. Ravi, what are your thoughts here? Would love to get your input.
Data democratization is a very common thing that I've always heard with a lot of enterprises. For me, Stephen, right, data democratization is not just about providing access to the data, right? It's about three things, right? It's about fostering a collaborative data culture, which I talked about in place, right? building a unified data architecture, leveraging a data product strategy, and a right set of self-service tools that would allow every user within the organizations to be able to easily share, access, and leverage those data. So for me, what I see is it's a shift going from COE, we have all heard of the term Center of Excellence, to what I call it as Center for Empowerment, where we are really empowering additional users, right? When I look into the pyramid of organization, there is always a lot of use cases that's coming in, but the amount of engineers and the infrastructure that's available to support them is lower, right? So by creating that Center for Empowerment layer, we can really enhance or support the data democratization needs wrapped with clear data governance and access controls is what I see as the way to go for data democratization.
That sounds like a good checklist to me, Ravi. And yeah, I agree. You're going to need good access controls. And, I think at least at some organizations, probably some data literacy type efforts, maybe even some AI literacy type efforts. I don't know if anyone's writing about that right now, but I'm sure they will at some point. Patrick, I'm going to let you finish this one up for us. Anything new you'd like to add? Do you agree with everyone, or?
Yeah, I also like Ravi's checklist. I think exactly what you just mentioned too. So Dataiku is in the business of providing a tool that works for programmers, engineers, but then also business folks. So like a visual UI for creating joins and cleaning data and training models even and building dashboards. And I think that definitely solves one problem, is giving people the tools that fit their skill set. But also you can't just bring in a tool like Dataiku and expect people to like adopt it. Personally, I've struggled to adopt like Asana and Monday and like workforce management stuff, let alone a data science and machine learning tool. Even if it's no code, like you need to teach people how to do joins and what a group by aggregation means and what does min and mean mean, and or like models and Gen AI, what all that stuff is, right? If you have any of you guys like talked with a friend at a bar recently about like what you do for work, like a lot of people are still kind of don't really know how models work. So I think bring in a tool, but then also like definitely you got to invest seriously in these data literacy programs, like really bench people for a couple weeks and like teach them data science or data analytics.
That's a great point, and I love your analogy, Patrick. I feel like unless you're in Palo Alto or San Jose or San Fran, if you start talking about the space with somebody that's not in it, there's a lot of blank stares usually. So that's a great point to make. I'm going to let you lead off our final group discussion question for today, and that question is, hopefully a fun one for us all. What trend are you most excited about that you think will have a big impact moving forward?
Man, I mean, I think Gen AI is going to be huge in robotics, but I don't think anyone here is in the robotics space. So I think that's the thing I'm cool about. But the thing that I'm personally working on right now is the open Lakehouse format stuff, like the Iceberg Delta Hudi stuff. It's evolving. AWS just made a move last week. For those of you who didn't see that, they're investing in native Iceberg support for S3 tables. At Dataiku, we kind of live mostly in the analytics, like OLAP space, but now we see clients wanting to do some of these OLTP type things, like Iceberg and Delta stuff, but now in the OLAP space too. So I think that's a topic that I'm personally thinking about a lot these days.
Iceberg is hot. It sounds weird to say that, but it is also true. Okay, Scott, you're up next. What has you most excited about?
Probably not the most spicy or like interesting thing, but like, I don't know, governance and semantics and how all this is going to play out. So traditionally, I think when we're talking about data and analytics, like you think of governance, and it's typically a function of who should get access to what data. Increasingly, that data can be scattered and multi-format or modal, and you have to make sure that data can be trusted. But a newer problem or a newer version of this problem is, can I trust this machine generated insight or recommendation, and who should have access to which models and which insights, and is all of this traceable? So data lineage being tracing data from another, can you trace down to the level of like what insights were suggested or actions were taken with machine generated things? With the semantics, I mean, data has meaning. So more than just like files or columns, and but when you combine data together, you aggregate it, it suddenly has business meaning. And how organizations are capturing the meaning of those things to help assist their AI tooling, I think will be a really both of those things will be a really interesting space to watch over the coming years, but maybe even months, with how quickly things seem to be moving in AI.
I'm glad you brought that up. You're right that it's not as buzzy as Gen AI, but it's kind of like you have to take your medicine. These are very necessary things, and we continue to track developments in this area. Nate, what has you most excited?
Yeah, when we think about the consumers for some of the data infrastructure that we've all spoken about today, you have the business user, the analytics engineers, you have the clients that may be written by a backend engineer, so the software clients. I'm really interested in what this means as we start to bring on agentic workflows. So those LLM powered agents, what is that going to mean for our ability to service that increased demand and do it cost effectively? So I talked about what are those different building blocks that you've used to build your data infrastructure. If you have one that's inefficient and you increase the amount of traffic on your infrastructure by 10x or 100x, you won't be able to compete. So making sure that you have a scalable data infrastructure, making sure you have a way to, again, deliver the right data products for those agents, but also make sure you can do it in a way that's consistent so they can actually coordinate as they're going through their journeys. Those are some of the things that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, and it does, to me, Nate, it does seem like AI, is kind of stress testing a lot of data infrastructure, as well as, data management practices that are in place at companies, some which are aligned at this point and some which kind of need to be revamped. Ravi, what has you most excited?
I mean, the thing that everybody is talking about, right? For me, it's the Gen AI piece, right? It's all about its integration into the advanced predictive and prescriptive aspects of the platform, right? We talked about a lot about, hey, there are different tools out there. The tools are changing every couple of years, and people having to learn and get through. That's typically what is impacting the adoption of newer technologies, right? And making people move. I think what I'm more excited is how enterprises are now moving with AI in their platform and the platform for AI in place, right? So now I no longer have to worry about learning a new technology and see how things could work. It's all about, can AI help me learn things for me, right? I think that's where the whole thing about meeting the users where they are, right? So that they can start using it. So AI is what I'm more excited about, and how it's going to take this whole enterprise platform on the space to the next level, the next coming years.
Understood. And yeah, there's an interesting dynamic where AI can be used to solve some of these challenges that we talked about today, but it can also, I want to say introduce challenges, but there are certainly challenges to using it effectively that need to take place. So before we depart here, I want to make sure we get to some attendee questions. Scott, you flagged this as one potentially of interest. It was, how do data lakehouses address the limitations of traditional data lakes or warehouses?
Yeah, so you think of I just think of data warehouses as have been, especially like in this move to the public cloud, have been very useful in making data very organized, very reliable. What I mean by that is you can, semantics are one thing, but you can trust that when you're adding new data to a table, that all the types are matching, all the data types are matching, that it's an all or nothing type of operation. So either the records are added or they're not. It's not partial. And some of that reliability has been a struggle with data lakes. But with data lakes, and what I mean by that is like some semblance of some structure on top of files in like a object store, is that when you're trying to do analytics type of work, like the reliability is a little bit harder, but you do get a lot of flexibility for how data gets stored, what format it's in, what types of tools you can integrate with it. So the concept of a lake house is marrying these two, the advantages of these two. But how it does that is it adds, generally there's some additional metadata on top of files and some way of tracking the state of data or the state of a table reliably. And I would say that generally, like it definitely has its advantages, a lake house architecture does, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily for everyone. What I mean by that is like if you have interoperability as a requirement, meaning like you need to use lots of different engines or tools, like Data Lakehouse is a clear bet. But if you don't really have interoperability needs and you would actually prefer like the simplicity of like one system and everything being super vertically integrated, then I would say that maybe a data warehouse would be the architecture for you. The point is that Data Lakehouse certainly has merit as an architecture pattern, but it may not be for everyone. So definitely give that a think when you're designing what the right architecture is for your organization.
Understood, Scott. And I'm going to open this question up to the rest of the floor. Nate, I'll let you go next if you have anything you'd like to add. And you can certainly comment on data architecture trends, which obviously are important, to this event as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add on that. I think that was a very thorough answer. The only thing that I'll continue to add on is just the way you architect these things for batch use cases may or may not be the way you architect them for real-time use cases. And that's where you start to see things like Lambda architectures, where you have your batch layer with your speed layer on top, or depending on your transformation engine, even a Kappa architecture where you do all your transformations and then have this exhaust that goes to your lakehouse or data warehouse. So those are some of the patterns when you start combining the batch with the real-time data and recognizing there's a spectrum between the two. But that's the only thing I'd add.
No, I appreciate it. And there has been, it seems, the past few years, an increase in different data architecture patterns that are kind of trending. We've been tracking them over here at DBTA. Ravi, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think the team covered it pretty well in that.
Okay. And just so I offer everyone, Patrick, anything you'd like to say to this?
No.
Trying to keep it fair and balanced over here. Okay, well, why don't we cap things off with one more question from me to all of you. And Patrick, I'll let you start with this one. If there's one thing that you'd really like our attendees today to walk away keeping in mind as they go throughout the rest of December and into the new year, what would that be? Hopefully that's not too much of a curveball, just, top of mind for you.
One thing. I think, I was talking a little bit about optionality today and democratizing access to these tools and systems and data and trying to remain a little bit flexible. But I do want to say, with all that in mind, I think there is a ton of value in bringing a super smart technical person to lead your data engineering or data science practice. Who knows all the different technologies and who can be a little bit authoritarian for your organization and set some standards for people so that it's not all crazy all over the place. I think, yeah, if you can invest in a tight knit group of talent, I think you'll see gains.
I think that's great advice. And yeah, sometimes you have to lay down the law, as far as standards are concerned. So that makes perfect sense. Scott, what about you? If there's one thing you'd want our attendees today to walk away keeping in mind, what would it be?
Hopefully this isn't too philosophical, but don't underestimate the value of time. your time, your people's time. I think we're talking about like architecture trends, data analytics on the future. When you're doing like the landscape's constantly changing, when you're thinking about what tools you're changing or adding, like think about how long is it going to take you to build that solution? How much time and labor and energy are you going to put into maintaining that? And is that going to go up or down as like more use cases come up? So you find new ways to start leveraging this infrastructure you've stood up. And is that going to scale? And so I would say the back to the original point, which is just don't underestimate the value of time.
I think that's a great point. Time is money, in addition to just being time. And yeah, if you start boiling the ocean or, getting into a ton of tech debt, I could certainly see that being a bigger issue. Nate, your final remarks.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about Gen AI. The foundation of any AI strategy is a data strategy, and specifically a data integration strategy. So just keep that in mind while you're building for the future. How are you going to join your batch and your fast-moving data together to support your initiatives? And the last thing I'll say is no one knows exactly how this is going to end up. So maintaining that optionality, maintaining that flexibility in whatever platform you choose will serve you well.
You're right. None of us have a crystal ball, as much as we're hoping AI helps with, predictions. Ravi, last but certainly not least, one thing you'd really like our attendees to walk away thinking about.
I would say, irrespective of all the technological trends that's happening up, right? Today it's Gen AI, tomorrow it's going to be something else. Data is going to be the key and the essence for all of those things, right? So really focusing on a data integration strategy, I think is going to serve as a foundational to be able to support any of the new shiny ones that's going to come up tomorrow in place, right? But just making sure that as we're looking into this strategy, select a platform, right now that's flexible, giving you the ability, and the one that scales with your business. So essentially focusing on the data strategy, right, to be able to set as a foundation to support any of the new ones that's coming up down the line.
Okay, well, that is it for today, folks. I'd like to give a huge thank you for our speakers for coming on board and sharing their insights and expertise. Once again, Patrick Frame, Sales Engineer Partnerships at Dataiku, Scott Teal, Product Marketing at Snowflake, Nate Stewart, CEO at Materialize, and Ravi Krishnan, Head of Sales Engineering at Nextla. So if you in attendance would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, you can use the same exact URL that you used for today's live event. This will be archived. It'll probably be up on the DBTA website by tomorrow afternoon. And we will send you a notice so that you know it's up and you can watch it on demand if you'd like. And if you would like a PDF of the deck, you can go to the handout section once that is live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.